I was at the Urban Big Data Center for 2 years when I was doing this research. I'm now employed at the School of Education, but I still research with UBDC data. And this is my colleague, Reid, who's also from the School of Education. But I must confess that we're both psychologists. Shh, don't tell anyone. Yeah! So I'm a social psychologist. Kate's a health psychologist. So before we begin, what do psychologists care about big data? Before we get started, I just want to define a couple things. When we're thinking about big data, a lot of people can define it in lots of various ways. And for those of you who are data scientists, you're probably familiar with the various V's. Volume, velocity, then we've got veracity, and we've got so many different V's. So big data is not just numerically big, it usually refers to the complexity of the data, the speed of the data, the real time of the data, the need for complex systems to handle the data, and of course, novel ways to analyze and visualize. And we'll play a drinking game. Every time I say the word data, you can do a mental shot, mental shot of whiskey. So that's big data. What do I mean by life-wide literacy? So we're in a school of education, and we're very interested in lifelong learning, whose tagline is pretty terrible, lifelong learning from cradle to grave. But I don't advocate that view, but that's what it means. According to UNESCO, UNESCO is a real big proponent of lifelong learning and also life-wide learning. Life-wide means not just in the classroom, but formal learning as well as informal and non-formal learning. And so that's the life-wide component. The literacies component has to do with some of the things we were talking about today. So literacy, a lot of people, laypersons, would think of literacy as reading. But actually, according to UNESCO, I'll read you a little definition here. Literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy involves a continuum of learning in enabling individuals to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and their potential, and to participate fully in their communities and their wider societies. So when we're talking about data literacy, we're very much talking about a UNESCO-type definition of enabling people to participate fully in the world around them. I need a clicker. Click. When I was at UBDC, or I'm still a UBDC affiliate, I still am part of the Educational Disadvantage and Place team. So when that gentleman was talking about place making, we very much talk about a place-based approach to learning. Because we know that if you engage in lifelong learning, you have more positive life outcomes, and happy places usually mean happy, healthy, engaged citizens who are engaged in learning, who are engaged in citizenship, and who actually live longer. So these are some of the people I work with, and Mike Osborne is also part of the Life and Data team network. So the project that we want to talk to you about today is called the Integrated Multimedia City Data Project. I know, it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Or as I like, it's called the IMCD, or as I like to call it, the IMCD. That's probably easier to remember. It is an open data product. You do need to apply to UBDC to use it, but it's free to anybody. You just have to sign up to the terms and conditions. Unfortunately, not all of the data is ready for use, so we'll just focus on some of the work that Kate and I did on the survey. But basically, it was a 1,500 household survey of the greater Glasgow area, so Glasgow City, but 7 contiguous authorities touching, plus Inverclyde. So it's 8 local authorities in total, 1,500 households. It's every eligible adult in the household for survey, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. We had over 2,000 participants, and we followed up. About 600 of them agreed to carry a GPS tracker around the city for a week, and of those, about 350 offered to also wear a life logging camera around their neck, which took pictures about every 5 seconds of what they saw as they moved around the city. I can talk you through the ethics of this, but that's probably a whole nother talk. Okay. Social media capture happened for 1 full year behind this project, starting with the Commonwealth Games right up through the referendum. So we have harvested a number of tweets related to Glasgow and related to a number of domains within Glasgow and also geolocated in Glasgow city centre. So let's just talk about the survey for a wee bit. What did we do? We wanted to measure attitudes, that is how I feel about something, behaviors, what people actually do, and literacies, which we operationalize as knowledge and or skills in the following domains: education, sustainability, transport, cultural and civic engagement, and ICT technology. We also have really full demographics about work, household indicators, things like number of cars you own and number of bedrooms and how you inhabit your house. I should say that it is representative of the census in every way except age. It's a slightly older population. So if you're interested in investigating variables of engagement in these things with older adults, it's a great sample. And we've actually already published a preliminary finding about how older adults engage in learning and all different kinds of learning in and around the city. And we found that age does in fact predict all forms of learning engagement. Generally speaking, the older adults were less engaged, which makes sense in the formal learning and even the informal learning, which is still structured. But the other forms of non-formal learning, that's self-led learning, teaching yourself something on the internet, we were really surprised to see that the older adults were engaged less in that as well, and less engagement in learning than national averages. So we found that predictors of the engagement were also feeling area indicators, one of them being feeling safe walking alone at night, another one being strength of belonging to the area, and also varied based on local authority. So you can read more about that in the International Journal of Lifelong Education. Which brings me to what we're talking about today. So I did this work and I was part of the team helping develop the survey and so on, and then got chatting to my colleague Kate, and Kate thought, oh, I'd really quite like to work with that data. So I think I'll hand over to her now to talk about her experience of applying for and using the data.
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you. So my connection with UBDC is very much as a kind of outward-facing somebody as a researcher that's interested in using the data for research purposes. So I applied to use the particular IMCD data, wasn't entirely sure what it would look like, whether I would have the capacity to analyse it myself. So it was an interesting endeavour because I'm interested, and I believe that for research purposes we shouldn't always move directly to primary research, that we should think about data that already exists either in the public domain or within research already. And I think that's the way that as researchers we are being encouraged to think, particularly with open access and open source research publications as well. So it chimed with my kind of changing ideas about where to access research data. I'm a qualitative researcher by background and expertise, so I was also kind of challenged by the idea that data needed to be quantitative somehow. And so UBDC at the moment, to me, looked like somewhere where all the scary data sits. But the life logging aspect and the GPS seems to marry a little between the quantitative and qualitative. So I was intrigued enough to think, oh, let's just see what it looks like. And that's when Catherine, we also had the support actually of 2 interns who are being trained as part of a kind of nationwide campaign to upskill our undergraduates in quantitative methods. So we had 2 interns who essentially helped us analyse the data, which was a very nice position to be in. Why I was interested as well was for our purposes of securing the data and having some sustainability for the data, was thinking about where we could take the conversation about big data and take it to the communities through which we'd actually obtained the data, through the areas of Glasgow the people who'd already given up their time for that primary survey, and go back to those communities and think, right, well, this is kind of what the research looks like, and we can translate this research so it opens up a big dialogue, a life-wide dialogue about what we're finding in the research. So we were lucky enough to get some funding to work in partnership to create basically objects, not coming from an arts background, but having an interest in it and thinking about how we would engage the public with our research. So we worked, just tell me when I should move on. I've not actually looked at this presentation. Is it all right? Okay, I'm still up. So we worked with MacLab, who some of you might have known about, and we got really quite far into development work with them. So much so, actually, that on the top right here, we were quite keen to visualise Glasgow and the local authorities that Catherine's spoken about. And we wanted to represent a map of Glasgow, but have something of depth and of research within the map. So we were able to rank different literacies according to area and have the map motorised to a degree to pull up and down according to local authorities. And so it conveyed some information about the research, as well as depicting the scale of which the survey had been based. So that was one aspect. We also had a quiz, an object which essentially allowed the public to engage in the kind of questions that we were thinking could convey something about their own literacy for different domains of literacy, so financial, health, and eco-literacy. So making decisions about where you may want to keep your money. Where's the safest place to keep your money? Is it under your bed at home? Is it in a bank? Or is it in a stock market account? So just general questions that introduce the idea of this is what we were considering were quite nice ways to explore literacy with people. We also have on the bottom right the idea that we really wanted a making activity, so it would engage children, and with those children would be families to make and think about the kinds of literacies that you could depict that meant something to the children themselves. And I'm kind of wearing one just now, and actually through there at the coffee break we've brought a sample of, you can all take one away, you build a body and you choose out of a number of literacies how to personalise the badge. So there's a decision about, you can't put all the literacies on, so what ones do you choose and what ones are most interesting to you and what does that one mean? And there's a dialogue and a family sort of setting that we'd hope to achieve. So anyway, MacLab went out of business and all our stuff was in the offices in Glasgow, and still is actually. We can see it through the window. So we'd managed to present the literacies work at a public engagement event at the Hunterian in Glasgow, but we were kind of a bit dissatisfied in that it was an interesting event, but essentially the audience was already engaged with higher education. They were often, I recognised children that were the professors' children or people that were already really quite connected to the idea of higher education. We wanted to go to places where you wouldn't necessarily expect researchers to be lingering about. So Glasgow University have a really good relationship with their public engagement team, and each year for the last 2 to 3 years we've connected with the ESRC Festival of Social Science, which is a nationwide campaign for public engagement in science. And so Glasgow last year set up their public engagement festival at the Barras Market, and amongst all the stallholders and tradespeople. And this year we were at IKEA. Can you step towards me? I want a picture. Okay. We were at IKEA. So you might recognise we have, a few steps back. So MacLab closed its doors, but we'd already gone quite far into production and development, and it was a big learning curve for us anyway to be involved in those design processes. We'd learned a lot, so it felt we shouldn't just abandon it and just think, oh, it was just one of these things, we'll move on, we'll take the hit. So we decided, and Catherine had already made connections with Joe at Creative Stirling through this network. So in a very short space of time, with great will and design, we remade as much as we could with the spirit of kind of the objects that we'd started with. So we managed really to go back to what we had, which was the badge, the making activity for the children. We had a quiz element where Stacey's in front of 3 quiz boards where the children can post. There's the literacy questions that they can connect with. It's a health literacy question, a financial and eco. And we also have a map of Glasgow. It's essentially now not a big motorised, expensive laser cut thing. It's no, it's a laser cut. It's a jigsaw. It's a jigsaw now. So kind of scale back. So this wasn't just us at IKEA. There was about 20 different projects that were represented by small teams of researchers dotted about the shop. We were posted in the, I don't know if any of you have been to the Braehead IKEA on a Saturday. 8,000 people came on an average Saturday in IKEA is 8,000. And we were in the cafeteria area with the big sofas. You can see here, we had a really good spot. So we were able to create a nice, relaxed, open, family-friendly space for people to come across. First of all, wondering what it was all about. Knew that Glasgow were there. Did they know? 800 people came to find out why we particularly were there, what we were there to do. And in that kind of 8,000. So I think conservatively we had about 800. We'd made about 200 badges and all of them went. So, it was a nice activity for people. But the big thing for us was that with the children, which was a great activity, but with the children came all other generations. Granny came, aunts came, fathers came, everybody came. So we were able to say why we were there and what we were, to be able to convey our research essentially through these objects is almost the starting point for discussion and discourse. So yeah, I mean, the UBDC was the beginning point for us. The making activity was really for us as researchers to think about how we can connect not just with the people who we are very acutely aware give up their time to fill out surveys, to take part in research, and it often feels it's a very one-way kind of production. So we disseminate our research often at a sort of nationwide, international level, but actually to go back into the communities by which the survey's taken place was something that I think that we are recognising as researchers that we want to do more of. And it was just a great partnership with Creative Stirling, and we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. And when we have a break, if you'd like to choose your body for your badge, and then you can decide which literacies that you either have a personal interest in that you want to develop within your own skills, something you think you would need to we should be valuing more. So there's different ways you can decide how to personalise it, essentially.
And this is a blog that Kate wrote on the UBDC website. If you want to look at adventures in design and data, how good design took big data to IKEA. And if you wouldn't mind clicking on the IMCD, that one. And then here's just a quick little visualization that people have done with at UBDC with the GPS data. It's a little bit gendered. It wasn't an artist who designed it. Pink for girls, blue for boys. But it just shows sort of some of the mobility in and around different areas of Glasgow for men and women who took part. And that last slide was just a plug for the different kinds of data that we have. The IMCD is just one. We've got other education data sets like UCAS, admissions data to higher education, HESA, which is attainment in higher education. We've got some Skills Development Scotland, employability data. But we also have much wider data. We've got satellite data, LiDAR data, which can help, which urban planners will know about, and we've got Strava data, which is cycling app data, and also mobile phone data, which are different levels of availability. I'm not saying they're all open, but they're all available for application, and the application's on the UBDC website. It's quite straightforward. It's just like, you know, when you get cut off on a phone call, they just give you a quick, it's a very quick form, and they triage it. And then if you're invited to apply, you can apply with your research idea, and they take it to the research approvals panel. And so there's just a whole world of data that's still out there that can be used. So if you're interested, just get in touch. Oh, and I say Helen and Joe and Stacy were all in those photos, so just a special to them for coming along and making the day so successful. I have to say, working with Creative Sterling was an absolute pleasure. We really, honestly, they were fast and responsive, and I think really delivered our vision maybe even more than we knew. So thanks.